All right, item number 8, Pension Solution Project Sponsors Update. We have Andrew and Ashish and Mr. Dave Delgado from CGI. So welcome, thank you.
Thank you, Chair Dillon. I'm going to introduce the item, if that's okay with you.
We'll go to Cassandra.
Thank you. This update is going to provide you with some background on the activity that's occurred since our last meeting. I think Andrew and Ashish have a good presentation to explain all of the activities that we've engaged in from the time that we started looking at the schedule, strain, and working through the fit gap analysis and the outcomes that we have reached with the team and the negotiations that we've engaged with CGI. Dave Delgado is here, and he is the Senior Vice President, I think. Is that what the title? Yeah. From CGI? On the West Coast. So we appreciate him being here. We have been actively engaged in the discussions to bring a recommendation to the board. And so I'm going to hand this over to Andrew and Ashish, who will walk you through what we've accomplished.
Thank you very much. So since we updated you in November, at the sort of the very highest level, what we have been doing is continuing with the Functional Rollout 1 or FR1 activities. We have also engaged in multiple efforts to reimagine our approach to project implementation, including a fit gap analysis. So an analytical effort to identify the gaps between the base Neospin product and the fit with our requirements, and also a track that involves project improvement ideas. And those activities allowed us to negotiate a path forward with CGI that we will get more into as we go along. Continuing on the background track, so essentially in the summer of last year, of 2017, we were given a new schedule by CGI that proposed an extensive addition of time to the overall project. So CalSTRS, in its due diligence, reviewed that schedule and expressed some concerns. So both CalSTRS and CGI collaboratively agreed to engage in a fit gap exercise that I just alluded to. And that really is looking at where the gaps are between what we, CalSTRS, need in order to conduct operations and the base Neospin functionality. We also engaged on an improvement ideas track. So these, at sort of a high level, are ideas that will reduce overall project risk. And we'll talk some more about those ideas later on in the presentation. And again, that allowed us to enter into negotiations with CGI, and that is the contract amendment that we are bringing forward to you today for approval. Some of the key project challenges and risks that we've been working through include, from an FR1 perspective, some of the complexity associated with bridging between the new system and our legacy system start, some of the defects in coding that we have discovered along the way. And again, to Dana's point, the defects aren't necessarily associated with the product itself, but with the efforts associated with bridging. And some of the resource shortages that we have experienced. And specifically, those are people working on the project. And then from an FR2 perspective, design progressed a little bit slower than was planned and was impacted by the functional boundary issues between Benefit Connect and Business Direct, our corporate accounting system. Another element in that complexity, so as you all know, CalSTRS has a complex plan design, and a good example of that is with our death benefits. So there are over 40 different death benefits and associated triggers. In order to automate that workflow or that effort, all of those things need to be built in and designed into the system. That's an example of the kind of complexity that sets CalSTRS apart from many of the smaller systems.
So just like Andrew mentioned, we talk about FR1, FR2 challenges. Here, we presented in November and last July about the overall concern about the viability of the schedule and the effectiveness of the resource management. So Dave is here. I think Dave is good time that maybe how we are mitigating, CGI is mitigating those concerns.
So when we initially realized there were schedule issues in December, we brought that to the attention of CalSTRS and said we need to really discuss where we're at and how do we go forward. CGI used internal resources that are really objective resources outside of our state of California team to really come in and help us do a bottoms-up, top-down review and help us understand, have we looked at this properly? Is the schedule achievable? And as we went through all of that, we were able to say, yes, under certain conditions that we need to collectively work on in terms of escalating issues, quicker resolving issues and things like that. We realized that we needed to look at that schedule in a completely different way. And one of the areas that we decided as we looked at the risks and the challenges was what was driving this? Why are we off on the schedule? And we came to several conclusions, one of which was that we needed to afford the project time to really vet the issues and the requirements that they were being faced with. As we looked for the system to automate the processes that are there, we wanted to make certain that we had really applied the right resources and given enough time to allow for that to be done properly. Otherwise, we would be rushing to a schedule and not adhering to the quality. And that was really our reasoning and rationale for coming forward to say, we have a schedule issue. We need to talk this through. So what I can say at this point in time is that we took these very seriously and have resolved these, I believe, in terms of how we go forward in the new schedule that we have put forward, that we have worked collaboratively with the CalSTRS team on to make certain that it is something that in partnership we can achieve. Because if either one of us can't do it, it won't happen. So we're clear that we have to work together to make this happen, and we're committed to do so.
So I want to talk a little bit more specifically about the fit gap exercise or analysis effort that we went through. There are some numbers up there, and you can see the dedication that CalSTRS put into this effort. One of the things that we did was free up leadership to be able to participate in this exercise. We canceled some of our regular quarterly business activities so that staff would have time to focus on our top priority. One of the other things that we did that I'd like to draw your attention to is evaluate each of the 144 gaps identified against a set of criteria. For example, criticality to business operations, urgency of business need, dependencies with other systems. So we had weekly meetings where Ashish, Robin, and myself would go through a list of of sort of the gaps in the proposed either configuration or customization that would be needed to address those gaps, so that we gave due diligence to every one of the gaps identified through this exercise. And that really gave us a better sense of what it would take in terms of time in order to validate the new proposed schedule.
Also, when we were doing the fit gap, we thought that maybe we had to look our overall project, that what are the improvements ideas which we started with 4 years back when we put the requirements, and now where we are on those. So we found out that there are some functionality, is a key functionality which is must to have. We thought that maybe we'll put that functionality into the new pension administration, but it's working right now in our SAP system. So we thought why we had to take it out and then retrofit there. So we came to the conclusion that maybe those kind of improvements will make our project success if we don't have to change in our Neospin. And that functionality is not exist at this moment in Neospin core function, so they have to provide that customization. So we work it out. That one is a long process, but we found out that this is the right way to do it. So we move forward. We got the credit for that one, as well as there are some other improvement idea which we evaluate kind of mandatory requirement or nice to have, and few which we thought that maybe we as a caster we can take on instead of CGI will take on. So we, based on that one, we evaluated, prioritize, and move forward with that. So
I have a question. Steve?
Yeah, I just had a couple of questions, clarification questions as we get into this. So when this process started out, and maybe this is more for staff than for the consultant, but did we anticipate this to be a complex project? One that, or let me put it another way. Has it turned out to be more complex, the project itself, than what we originally thought?
I think from day one is a complex project. It's a large, complex IT plus business, you know.
Yeah, but that's not really my question. Is it more complex now, based on what we know, than what we thought when we entered into the project?
But I think with the higher customization, it is.
Is, yeah.
Well, I think, yeah, go ahead. I think that CalSTRS is a highly complex system by itself, so we knew we were going to be complex. This is the biggest implementation that Sagitech has done, and CGI is the system integrator that partnered with them. So I think that what we have tried to do in issuing the RFP is go through and provide as much detail as we possibly can for them to understand what we need. But until we are working through actual transactional processes, that's when you kind of understand a little bit more details on the scale of what we're trying to do. So we knew we were complex. I mean, even I was talking to David Lamoureux earlier, and he was saying, you know, one of the indicators is look at our CEM, you know, scores and how much work and the cost it takes to run the system is because of all the complexity that is applied to our organization. So we knew that, it's just that we don't know all the details of that until we get into it.
And my question sort of emanates more from around the cost issue, and in particular, what we're going to be tackling later in terms of increased allocations of funding for this project. Just wanting to understand the extent to which complexity or increased complexity or greater than anticipated complexity has contributed to that cost factor. And maybe we can hold off and wait to answer that question when we get to talk about the actual additional funding. But that's really where my question comes from is that part of, if you look at the money that we're now asking for, is part of the increase due to the fact that we didn't quite anticipate how complex this was?
Yes, there's
Yeah.
two things. Some of it is understanding better the scope, because we had 144 gaps that we identified. 55 of those we discussed as we didn't understand, or there was not enough clarification as to the complexity of these processes for us to have appropriately or bid on those in a reasonable manner. And so those were areas that we needed to discuss. Was it included in the scope or wasn't it included in the scope? And we discussed that. And then on top of that, we have added additional scope because we have things that have changed because our system is continuously changing. We have one of the change requests that we've included in this includes a component of our generational mortality tables that we are now using that we didn't use when we were issuing the RFP 4 years ago. So that is new functionality. And like I said just a second ago, things are changing, legislative changes happen. We're still changing START. While we're doing this implementation, we're still trying to change the legacy system to meet the needs and some of the legislative things that we have to adhere to. So it's a balance in trying to manage both of those things. So it just continuously evolves in its complexity, but I don't want you to have a misunderstanding that we knew we were complex, and I think they knew we were complex. We just don't know what we don't know until we get into it.
I have a wholly unrelated question. Are you guys part of Fiscal? Do you participate? Are you part of the new state accounting system?
We are deferred, you know.
Yeah, we're deferred, yeah.
Oh, you're deferred. Okay. Well, you're lucky. I'll save my other question. No offense, Jacko. Or the controller's office. I'll save my other question for when we talk about allocation.
Okay, so moving on to the impact of both the fit gap analysis and the improvement ideas efforts. Speaking, I think for myself personally and for the team, the fit gap exercise was really an excellent opportunity for CalSTRS and CGI to work together collaboratively and identify a way to more swiftly get into, identifying those gaps. And so when we go into design, we can use those as a roadmap. We're finding that is helpful in terms of making the design sessions more streamlined and efficient. So it was worth the 90-day investment in time to go through that exercise. Same with the improvement ideas. This is something that allowed the two teams to work together collaboratively and identify ways to reduce overall project risk by making adjustments to the project implementation that we had initially, as Cassandra said, started off on years ago. And sort of applying what we've learned as we've gone along has helped us to identify ways to reduce risk and move forward with our schedule.
So before we move forward, I think we have to give the kudos to the team. Actually, they work so hard. The staff works tirelessly 90 days. I know how much commitment they put. The vacation around the Thanksgiving and the New Year timeframe, I think they did I think they surprised us. Actually, when we were doing this one, we were very skeptical about that we can pull this off, but they did it. So I just want to point it out there.
Yeah, I'll echo that. A lot of people worked very hard for a long period of time, and we achieved success in that effort. So now we've got a re-estimated schedule that we have a degree of confidence in that replaces the previous schedule dropped in July of 2017 and reflects the outcomes from the fit gap analysis and the other project improvement ideas and the other diligence undertaken by both CalSTRS and CGI since September of 2017. And this is kind of a broad overview of how the schedule has shifted since we initially began with CGI in 2015. So you can see that initial contract column shows the dates that when we signed the contract were sort of the projected dates for project completion for the various phases. And then in December of 2016, we agreed to CR 59, which shifted the schedule. That's the 676 that you see, shifting FR1 6 months, FR2 7 months, and FR3 6 months. The latest proposed schedule that we've been talking about and is the subject of the amendment was delivered in December of 2017 and shows FR1 undergoing what we call a soft launch in October of 2019. We're calling it a soft launch because since we are not bridging, we're not requiring the employers to go live with this functionality and shutting down certain elements of our legacy system. That allows more time for the employers to ramp up and also allows us to pull forward the new file format. FR2 is shifted a total of 32 months and will go live in 2021. And that is when we're cutting over and relying completely on our new system. And then FR3 is at this point projected to go live in February of 2022. So that final column shows you the number of months of the total shift from when we signed the contract in 2015. And in terms of the viability of this schedule, I'm going to turn this over to Dave.
So with regard to the schedule, we really took a lot of time and effort through the 90-day review process to make certain that we were encompassing the activities associated with CalSTRS as well as CGI in order to undertake these tasks. As we looked at it, we agreed that there were some things that we could both do in order to make sure that this schedule is met. There are obligations by CGI to provide the right resource mix and leadership. And I will say in the new scope, we have increased our staff size to support the additional work. And we've made certain that we have additional leadership, both locally and from our corporate office, to help us because this project is that important to us as well. The other thing that I would say is that we built in safeguards to this particular schedule where we were very mindful about overlaps of activities that were going on. And overlaps are important because this was one of the areas where we ran into problems before where we would be moving into a testing mode, for example, and then another part of the team would move into design session for the next phase, but that overlap was not necessarily appropriate at that time. And we needed to actually bring back some of the designers into the testing phase. And so we've looked at where could that possibly happen again and try to make certain that we don't have that type of overlap so that no team, whether it's on the CGI side or CalSTRS, would have any kinds of issues at this point. The other part of this is that we want to be able to show demonstrable deliverables that show progress. and make certain that there are steps where we can all agree we are achieving the right time frame for completing the work. We're on task, we're on schedule, so those are built into this as well. And then the other part of this are the recommendations regarding how we work together better. Escalation earlier is better. Resolution to the problems will be better. Our governance model is improved. And beyond all of that, I think the good news about this process was that both CalSTRS and CGI vetted the solution again to make sure that it was the right one, and we got a resounding yes on both sides as we independently made sure of that. We also made certain that we could deliver. And after reviewing the schedule, talking about the risks that were involved and which risks were worth it and which we should mitigate, as well as how we would move forward together as a collaborative team, really was a game-changing opportunity for us that we've leveraged in this schedule. So I would say to you that it's important for me to convey to you on behalf of Team CGI that there are IT projects and then there are IT projects. And this one falls into the latter category. This is large and complex in that it's not that we don't know how to deal with it. It's just that we know we can do this in really fine-tuned ways to meet your member requirements, and we want to have the time and ability to do that. The system is flexible enough to do more than what was even envisioned in the beginning, and that's a very good news story. It will take us a little bit longer to achieve it, but knowing that this system will be in place for 15 years or more, this is a prudent investment of time so that everybody can vet those processes and those policy changes that automation will force. So I think it's an appropriate way for us to have looked at the project. The other thing I would say is that anyone can undertake a project, but it's the spirit of how you're approaching it. And I want you to understand that Team CGI looks at this as a really good, positive cause in the implementation of this system. We understand that we are serving retired members and working members in the teaching community. This is very important to us. This is what we wake up for every day. And this is what we want to be a part of in terms of a success. So it's mindful to us every day that somebody is going to be impacted by this system, and we want to make certain that as we embark on this new schedule, that we've done everything to anticipate, to the best of our ability, a successful implementation, a timely implementation, and one that ultimately meets the members' needs.
Eric?
Thanks for being here, Mr. Delgado, and appreciate your last comments because they answered my question, one of my questions, which was how does Team CGI define success? And what a great opportunity for CGI to at the end of the day, with confidence, bring forth a system that's going to serve the largest teachers retirement system in the world.
Great.
So it's a great opportunity for your firm. And the complexity of CalSTRS is what it is. I mean, it's large, it's complex, it's ever-changing. I think what I would like to better understand, I mean, there's the vision, there's clearly the spirit of collaboration and trying to work through problems, cost, risk mitigation, et cetera. And there's papers that are presented to us. When does the team really actually think there'll be some software that's tangible, that people will actually be able to feel, see, and touch?
Play with.
Okay, so Harry,
And I'm a simple layman.
No. I think that's why I think we reach out to CGI that we would like to see the incremental progress. We want to see the demo, and periodically, we just don't want to wait for another year or 2 years later, and then we'll figure it out what's going on. So Andrew and I and Cassandra, I think we collectively reach out to CGI that we would like to see the payment milestone as well as the incremental progress. And in the demo fashion, just like we did for Karen, I think we can, we will do that one from now until we'll have the rollout. So I think that's the commitment we need from CGI also, that how they can provide. And in a manner that our staff and our stakeholder, they can take a look.
And I would just add to remember, this is a working, functioning system in other pension plans. This is something that is now being configured to meet your specific requirements. And so we can demo the system to show you what it can do out of the box, as we say. But as we make those design and development and configuration changes to support what your requirements are, we can also show you, there it is. And that should match then the requirements that you've been asking for throughout this project. So there's a way for us to do that. You're not waiting for custom developed code from the very beginning. This is not a scratch custom project. You're leveraging something that we know works, and now we're fine tuning it to a level that's most appropriate for CalSTRS.
Lynn?
Thank you. Thank you. I just wanted to say, first of all, thank you to you both and to your teams. I know that it was a heavy lift to do the 90-day fit gap and the improvement process at the same time. And hopefully people feel really good about the direction of the project now and a much deeper level of understanding, and appreciate the work of CGI as well, too. And I guess at this point, now that you've had this chance to step back and look at the project and reconfirm what you wanted to do, how confident is the staff that the new project timeline is achievable going forward?
You always ask that question. So I think we are in the medium level. Next few weeks, our staff will be validating all the schedule of what the commitment we are making right now, how just translating into our working product. So I still think that maybe when we'll come next, we'll provide you the concrete answer, but this time, I think I will just say medium. Yeah.
Okay. I wanted to switch gears just a little bit and talk about some of the outreach that we have done as part of our due diligence efforts. And so specifically, I had the privilege of being asked to join a CEM Global Steering Committee. And CEM is our pension benchmarking firm that you regularly receive presentations about. CEM started this community of practice, and so they asked the steering committee, what topics would you like to explore? And we came up with a list of about 20. The one that I submitted was system implementations, and fortunately that was something that was selected. And so we hosted 8 systems here at CalSTRS last month, including the Canadian federal government BC Pensions, Ohio PERS, Texas Teachers, CalPERS, and of course ourselves, as well as 2 Dutch systems. And it was a 2-day deep dive on the topics of organizational change management, project management, sort of the overall portfolio management, and agile versus waterfall, sort of project implementation approaches. And we spent a lot of time talking about those 3 things and learned some really interesting things about large pension funds that are implementing new pension administration systems. So for example, the Canadian federal government, very analogous to CalSTRS in that it has 1,100 employees and 1 million members. Their system implementation took 10 years. And so we talked a lot about, why it took so long, and there are some key differences between what we're doing and what they're doing. They did 3 sort of separate projects, 3 separate systems. We're really doing just one. But that kind of, the amount of time that it takes to implement a system in a large pension organization, what we're looking at now with this new schedule is sort of in the sweet spot. It's kind of an average length of time to implement a system. There were a number of other aha moments, and several other key CalSTRS staff were involved in that. And we're going to be implementing some of the things that we learned as part of our own, taking accountability for what CalSTRS can do better moving forward in terms of the strategies that we're taking to implement the new system and all of the things that we're doing here inside of CalSTRS. We also met with other state agencies to understand how, even though they're not pension systems necessarily, we wanted to understand their experience with system integrators and large technology projects and how to kind of manage contracts, and got a lot of good information that, again, we are taking accountability to implement on our side.
Andrew, when you talk about, some of these systems taking 10 years to implement, or for us, I have lost count now. Do you know what the new total, Cassandra, in terms of time, if we add the 30 months? Oh,
If it's 7.5.
so 7.5 years for our,
So
hopefully.
we're looking at seven at this point.
So how do we deal with, I guess I'm just conscious of, it takes us 7 years to complete a project. And hopefully we have, I think I heard you reference this, Dave, maybe 15 years. I hear 15 years and I think, I hope it lasts 15 years, but I kind of look at the rate of IT and how fast things, so that's a question I kind of didn't think about until just now, about how do we,
Outdated.
by the time we get it done, is it going to be obsolete? Do you get where I'm going, right, Ashish?
Yeah, I know.
And then,
I'm going to comment on this real quick, just because we've talked about this a lot. And one of the things that we are really being mindful of is making sure that we aren't customizing the system to a large degree and recoding the core framework, and keeping our changes are really at a configurable level to where, as the product matures in the environment and improves the environment, we'll be able to receive those enhancements. So hopefully we'll have some longevity with the system as it improves. Yeah, that's what our hope
you would
is.
hope so, because that's
Yeah.
a lot of time and a lot of money. and you
Sagitech
would want it to
heard
last.
that, so they're going to make a lot of improvements.
Thanks, that's helpful.
Anything else?
That's an interesting question, because the things are, technology gets updated. As we're implementing and we're doing whatever we're doing with Neospin, how many updates have we already gone through from Neospin?
So when we started the project, this is too technical, so we started the project, the software is a Microsoft base, and it's a 4.0, and now we are already 6.0. So I think that's why Cassandra is saying we don't want to go too much customization.
Right.
When any new upgrade is coming from Microsoft, we can't support. Or if we're supporting that, it will take another 3 years to support that one.
Does that include patches and all that kind of
Yeah,
stuff
so
too?
all patches.
Wow, okay, thank you. I'm an Apple gal myself.
All the work on this and the great presentation. I kind of want to follow up on Lynn's question and ask that a little bit differently. She said, how confident are we that we're going to keep on schedule? And as she said, moderately confident. It was kind of in the middle, right? I mean, so we're roughly 2.5 years behind the schedule that we had anticipated when we initially entered into the contract. So, I mean, if we're delayed another 3 months beyond this, that's no, calamity. But if we're 5 years, that's a whole other thing. So can you give me a little bit of a sense of not just the question of are we going to make it on time, but what protections do we have that we're not going to find that, we're going to have to, we're going to be delayed another 2 years, 3 years, something like that? How do we make sure that doesn't happen?
Early indicators. So what are early indicators? Just like I think I mentioned to Harry that what kind of demos we can provide, July, September, kind of. What kind of functionality is not here, but offshore also. There are a lot of functionalities is going through based on our specs, and they are converting into theirs, how we can see quickly that what the quality is coming. So that demo, as well as the testing, our IBNB and IPOC, they will be also looking in that one. But we have to come up with the plan, and I think Dave is also saying that when the payment milestone is restructured in a way, how they can show us these are the early indicators that this system we are building is the right system. Because just like we are saying that this is not a customization, it's a configuration. So we can see in next few months that if we are heading into the right direction.
So So the early indicators that we have, I mean, going forward, we've kind of got more robust early indicators. We're going to have early indicators that are reporting to us earlier. I mean, compared to previously, have we improved our early indicator system?
I think we have to, we are developing those to find out that what kind of functionality, just like it's a debt processing. Andrew mentioned we have a 40 plus, criteria about debt processing. If we'll see that one when we finish the design, and we can check with the development team that, okay, when they will be providing, maybe we can see that, okay, if that is functioning the way we envision. So I think that's kind of functionality I'm just thinking about.
And I think maybe I can add a little bit. Some of the things that I think that we realized as we were going through some of these schedule strains, because I think that we recognized, and Dave probably has his version from CGI's perspective, where there was strain. And we were trying to work through those. And we saw those fairly quickly. We started reporting on them and identifying them. It took us a while to get through the negotiation or, changing the schedule and going through it a couple of different times. What we realized, one of the areas that we think that we can improve is to escalate faster and more often to us, and then escalate it to the, anybody else that can make any improvements to get things through the process faster. Because I think that staff and the project team try to work through some of these issues, and they don't get escalated quickly enough so that somebody at the executive level can cut through the minutia and get to a resolution faster. So that's one of the things that we both committed to try to achieve. But I think that we had early indicators. It takes, we had several of them that stacked on top of each other, and we started the renegotiation from discussing the schedule shift.
And one of the other things I'll add is that, we are now moving, we're more than halfway through design. So in terms of surprises, we have already experienced a number of those. And as we move through finishing design, that's going to make a difference in terms of, in addition to the early indicators, also not having as many opportunities for surprise. Okay. So recommendation. We are recommending that you approve the contract amendment in item 15D. Are there any other questions that we can answer at this
I
point?
don't have anybody in line. Is there anyone else? Any questions?
I'm sorry, we have one more slide here with our next steps. And so just kind of self-explanatory, I don't need to read you the bullets. We're going to be incorporating the components into a contract amendment. Should the board approve that amendment, we'll rebaseline the project schedule, and we'll restructure the project according to some of those improvement ideas that we've talked about, and communicate that impact to both the internal audience as well as to our stakeholders.
David? Oh, sorry. When I looked last, there wasn't anybody there. Karen?
Thanks again for your hard work. When I look at this, the amount of the contract that wants to be awarded that you worked out, I'm not saying it in all the terms that are supposed to be said, but I'll just say it from my standpoint that, do you know what this money is going to be used for, or is it money already spent and you're just recouping it? So what is the intention of the additional amount of money? It wasn't clear to me in the write-up.
I can tell you that it boils down to two things: additional functionality and additional time. We have added a net 30 months to this project, and our team needs to be here for those 30 months. And we also need to deliver on the additional refinements and configuration and customizations that have been requested.
So people, power, and product?
Absolutely. This is a more refined product and a bigger solution that I think is ultimately a better solution for you.
And the money has not yet been spent.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Okay.
This is all going forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, and just thank you again for all the work that you've done, and to all the staff. I know it's been a long haul so far in the project, and we've got some time to go. So really appreciate it. I appreciate all the efforts that you and your team have made as well to work with us. All of you have talked about the complexity of the project, including the fact that when we started with the RFP and went through the procurement process, I think getting into the project, we identified that there was more complexity, more interpretation around requirements that may not have been known when we first signed the contract. Through the fit gap analysis, do you think that some of those unknowns, some of that complexity, that we've peeled back the layers of the onion and identified as many of those as we can? I mean, I realize that our requirements evolve, so if there are new legislative requirements or other requirements that we need to address, those may still arise, but in terms of surprises, high degree of confidence that we've found them?
So that's why I think 144, overall gaps in our understanding and the CGI understanding clarify that one. Out of those, 55 is a new scope. So that's why I think we are confident, and that's we're talking about the complex functional rollout too, and that's the biggest rollout. So we are confident that right now the requirement is not crystal clear, but is clear.
As we go through design, there is the opportunity for additional things to come up because the fit gap was not done at the sort of 1 foot level, but a little bit of a higher level, not super high. I mean, we really had the opportunity to get in. We think we have uncovered maybe 80% of what might arise during design. That was a lesson learned from FR1 where things just kept popping up and we really, things took more time than we thought they would. We are also planning to do a similar exercise for functional rollout 3 as we get further along in the schedule so that, again, we can uncover things well ahead of time. And the good news about FR3 is that it's a much smaller rollout relative to FR2.
Identified.
I do agree. The 90 days proved to be well worth the time and effort, not only to identify the gaps, but to allow the teams the opportunity to review them all systematically with really the highest levels of executives on both sides to help make decisions on what's in and what's out, and make those decisions based on good process and making certain that risk was assumed around that, and also the benefit of the functionality. And I think I've heard in the past where you've had IV&V and IPOC come in, one of the challenges with highly configurable systems is that you can configure it to death. And there can never be an ending point unless you establish an ending point. And so I think that having gone through this process, we know that the project's scope has really not changed other than it's been enhanced. The strategy is the same. The environment is the same. So I'm confident in our ability to have the discipline necessary to hold on scope where necessary. Let's don't put in more than we need. Let's get the system in and running because you can always go back and do something like that. I believe that the 90-day fit gap allowed us to get to a point where we are collectively agreeing that by and large, this does represent what the system needs to do. And there will be that 10, 20% of additional configurational change that might be required, but those will be addressed through governance, and executives will make those decisions to make certain that the business case is there to add on that time and or cost. Okay.
Andrew, Ashish, Dave, thank you very much.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate it.
Appreciate it very much. Thank you.
John, Graham, come on up. Thank you, Steve.
Different John.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Oh.
I was like, why is
But I'm, but I'm
Jansen
gonna,
coming
but
with
John, I'm gonna put you up right after these guys, I promise.
little legislation?
If you wanna go up.
on the
Biblical names are popular that year.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
So I'm Graham Finley with Grant Thornton, here to present our independent project oversight report. On the pension solution project, not surprisingly, the focus of my report today will be on what's happened since the last board meeting, and in particular, the fit gap exercise that's occurred and the negotiations between CalSTRS and CGI, and then also to talk about what this means for the successful completion of the project moving forward. So I have a background slide here just sort of laying out how we get to the point we are right now, but I think, Ashish and Andrew covered this pretty much. I'm not going to go through this line by line, but I do want to, reinforce the main point that a key reason that the project was in this situation and that this whole exercise had to happen is that there was a significant gap in understanding between CalSTRS and CGI on what exactly the product had to do in order to meet business needs. And if there was an underestimation of complexity, that was probably the biggest area, just what exactly the product had to do and how it would do it, and the devil's in the details. So this fit gap exercise was intended to close that gap. So I want to talk about the extent to which we think the fit gap actually succeeded in that effort, and then how the project can prevent another gap emerging as the project moves forward. So in terms of our observations on the fit gap, when we presented to you at the November board meeting, we identified what we felt were some critical success factors for the fit gap process, and I've just sort of laid these out here with our observations after the fit gap has now succeeded, or completed, I should say. First one was a shared definition of success. We wanted to make sure that CalSTRS and CGI had a shared understanding of what the point of the fit gap was and how they, would declare victory. And to a large extent, we think that happened. The sponsors did a good job of laying out at the beginning of the fit gap process the purpose of fit gap to staff, and I think both CGI and CalSTRS kept the fit gap sessions pretty much on point. So they were focused on the right thing, and they were coming out with a joint product that both sides felt met the purpose of the initial exercise. Second thing was engagement from the right stakeholders, and this was to make sure that the right people were actually engaged in the meetings, and maybe even more importantly, that the right people were talking. And I think this is something that we particularly, felt encouraged by as the process moved forward, because the people who got more and more vocal during the process of the fit gap sessions were the business owners, the people who will actually end up owning these business processes, and they were the people who were doing most of the talking. And that gives us, I think, more confidence that the product of this exercise is going to be truly reflective of the business needs. There's this question of ambiguity. Was ambiguity eliminated? We were just talking about that a couple of minutes ago. And both CGI and CalSTRS have expressed a clearer understanding, and I think a clearer joint understanding of what the design requirements actually are. That 80 to 90% figure that was brought up a few minutes ago is probably in the right neighborhood. There will still be some things come up, but by and large, it appears that a lot of the real gaps and ambiguity that were hampering the project going in have been addressed, at least in large parts. And then the last part was timely decision-making. I'll be honest, we were a little skeptical that the project could make it through this in 90 days. There was an awful lot of work to be done, and the ability to make decisions quickly wasn't something that the project had found easy up till that time. But they were able to push through and get the work done on time and come up with a product that I think is pretty much what was planned and what was needed to move forward. The other track that I want to talk about very briefly is this project improvement ideas that I think was discussed briefly by Andrew and Ashish. And this is exploring options for changing the way the project is approaching other areas with the idea of reducing complexity and reducing basically the risk of the project. And there were a number of ideas that were considered. There were three major ones that were adopted that basically amount to moving scope around to reduce complexity. The one that I want to, focus on the most to make sure everybody's aware of the implications is this change to the FR1 implementation approach, and it was referred to in the prior presentation as a soft launch. And the intended change here is really that there'll be an extended pilot for functional release 1 for employee reporting. And so there's a number of benefits to this. One, it will eliminate some of this complex bridging activity that's been required, or anticipated to be required, because the previous approach was going to have the pension solution, functional release 1, and START running in parallel. and there would need to be bridging programs that would be custom developed to pass information between the two systems. And those were the programs that had a lot of problems in FR1 with testing. And that's essentially throwaway code that once FR2 went live and Start was retired, those bridging programs would be decommissioned. This approach pretty much eliminates the need for that bridging. It also gives employers a lot more time to get used to the system because they get a year to really try out the system before they go into production and get used to it, which, given that there's going to be changes to file formats, is going to be particularly important, I think. But one key thing to recognize is it does mean that the employees won't be actually using the system in production until FR2, because it's that point we go from a soft launch to a hard launch, and it's in full production. And so what it means is that there's going to be a period of, up to 3 years before people are really using the system in full production mode, right? And that's sort of what we're talking about in terms of the implication. So I want to talk a little bit about what that means and some thoughts I have about making sure that the project's progress here out is on a successful track. So one of the main challenges I want to talk about moving forward is this extended period between functional rollouts. If we're looking at several years before the system is really in production and people are using it, that creates a number of challenges and risks. The first one I want to talk about is this concept of demonstrating progress and value. How do you know that you're truly making progress and that the product that is being developed is what you really expected? There's been a lot of effort happened in the last 3 months to narrow that gap in understanding and have both CalSTRS and CGI feel that the product they're working on is the same product and that it's going to meet everybody's expectations. How do we stop that gap from appearing again? And how do we make sure that people feel that there's actual value being delivered, right? And they feel a sense of accomplishment. And there's this sense of maintaining momentum too. That's something that's been brought up by the board in prior meetings, this question of staff fatigue, and these are long projects. It's hard to work hard on a project like this, especially when you can't see visible, demonstrable victories on a regular basis. And when you have this long before you're really going live with software, it becomes a real challenge. And so both of those reasons, we really think and encourage the project to try and focus on finding ways to have true demonstrable value that can be shown and that the employees can celebrate and CGI can celebrate, and is showing also to everybody that the project is really making progress and what's being delivered is what was intended to deliver. So the point that Harry, I think, made a few minutes ago about, actual live working software, I think is critical. And this isn't an easy thing. There's quite a lot of logistical issues with how do you actually demonstrate something that is working, and how do you make that process efficient and clean and not become another administrative burden on the schedule. But we do think this is a critical area that there needs to be some imagination applied to, and the project needs to come up with an idea of how to do that and show that real value in a way that everybody can recognize it. And I think everybody would benefit from that across the project.
Okay, transitioned right to, I was going to ask him, can you get...
Okay. So a second area around challenges is the strategy and plan for implementing these improvement ideas. They've been defined at a relatively high level. I think people agree they're good ideas, but how it really will work in practice is still to be laid out in some detail. So that's an area that has to be resolved fairly quickly. And then the final area is, of course, the achievability of the schedule. And given that the project has had quite a few challenges hitting any of the main deadlines they've had to date, it's a fair question to ask, what makes us think that this schedule is going to be more successful from the last? So I'll add my own opinion to the ones that have been added. I too have sort of a moderate degree of confidence in the schedule that's been put forward. And what gives me that level of confidence is some of the root causes that have caused some of the issues to date have been resolved in terms of this gap in understanding of what really the scope and complexity of the software is. And that was one of the main drivers of some of the problems going forward. But I think to improve that level of confidence, there's a few things that we're going to be monitoring. And I think the term leading indicators was actually used maybe by Ashish a little bit earlier. I think that's a great term to use, is this idea of what can you be watching in the near term that will flag whether or not the schedule that has been put out there is actually achievable. The three that I would like to focus on, number one is resources. So it's an obvious one, but are the right people from CalSTRS and Team CGI dedicated to the project and doing the work that they're anticipated to? The second is this clarity on scope and design decisions. And what I mean by that is people are sticking to the fit gap decisions. And this is already something that we're able to watch because the design sessions coming out of FitGap have already started. And this is something where we can see, are people walking into the sessions recognizing we've already made some decisions and now we're elaborating on those decisions, and people aren't opening the box up again and wanting to sort of reimagine the world. That's going to be a key area. And then the final piece is what I call predictability. And people sometimes term this the say-do ratio. You say you're going to get something done in a certain period of time. What percentage of the time are you actually getting it done? And the project hasn't had a great track record to date in some of those areas. There's an opportunity as we're looking at the work that's underway now and will be underway over the next few months to see how that level of predictability changes. I would say, and this is I think a promising thing, is that the challenge the project has right now is a little bit different than what it has been over the past 6 to 9 months. And Andrew may have made a reference to a similar point, that if you think about maybe a manufacturing analogy, what the project has been doing till now is product design. And what they've been trying to estimate is how long does it take us to finish the design of the product. We're starting to move into something that's closer to actual production line activity. You're actually creating things and building widgets. That is a somewhat easier process to control and to understand, where you are and project out. And there are various techniques you can use. If you think about the equivalent of sort of Lean Six Sigma for the software engineering practice, you can apply those types of techniques to understand how efficient you're actually being and whether you're actually going to meet a target. And it becomes a little bit easier to predict. So we're going to be watching those kind of indicators. I hope by the time we get to the May board meeting, we'll have started to see some of these roll out. We'll have some information that'll give us, hopefully more level of confidence in the schedule as it's been defined.
So please excuse me, because I'm probably going to say back what you've just said and what's on the screen in front of me. But I want to be sure that I'm processing it properly. It's late in the day, and just the way in which I process stuff. So, project more complex than we expected. The complexity has led to where we are today. We have the 90-day period of the fit gap. We know we know what the projected time of the project is, the additional resources that are going to be necessary. The likelihood of achieving success within the schedule that we're currently looking at, based on CGI and CalSTRS having the appropriate resources and people dedicated to the team, dedicated to the project. The not reopening the box and staying focused on what the fit gap, that time period, and on those, are we focused on that and not throwing in new pieces, adding additional complexity? And then third, say-do ratio, are we seeing an increase in the say-do ratio? So if I were to ask you in 3 months, how are we doing relative to the resources, clarity, and say-do ratio in terms of my oversight responsibility, would that be an appropriate focus for me?
Yes, it would.
Thanks.
All right. That's actually my last slide.
Any other questions for Graham? Alrighty, John.
Good afternoon, everyone,
Good afternoon.
and thank you for the opportunity to meet with you again. I'm John Lemelin from Maximus, and I'm the project's IV&V services provider. A fair amount of the things I've got on my slides you've heard before, either from the Ashish and Andrew and Dave team or from Graham. So I won't go through a lot of the duplication, but I'll try to add my thoughts. This is kind of my overview. We've got 4 basic positive developments. For a number of these Graham just went through, and I've got a slide on these, and then there's 3 high-risk areas that I want to just remind you about. So positive developments, there have been, obviously, to me, 4. You've heard about them. The first 2 are fit gap and project improvement, and there I want a special call out to staff and to the project team. Ashish and Andrew mentioned this. It's the team that's been going through this. It's a 90-day exercise. Graham mentioned stress and burnout in a long project. They have really, truly dug in and worked very hard for this, and that is monumental. The second 2 accomplishments, I have to give the call out to execs, and you've heard this from me before. If you look at the success criteria for these projects, it's all about schedules, it's all about requirements, it's all about the technical details, but it starts and stops with the executives. The people behind me, Cassandra, Ashish, Andrew, Robin, to some extent Jack, as well as the CGI people, have been absolutely dedicated. The executives, Dave and Greg and others, have been absolutely dedicated on those second 2 bullets to get this project through a very difficult transition and form a better understanding of the requirements and turn that into an MOU that's been signed by the parties. So huge effort. And that's huge kudos to them. At the end of the day, as the IVNV, we're kind of the technical eyes and ears. I mean, as you know, we look at the project across 9 areas, and I think there's like 160 different attributes that we look at on a monthly basis. And you can, 120-page reports and things like that. So number one, we're very encouraged by the progress, both from the teams and from executives. But at the end of the day, to me, it's all about the schedule. Those are wonderful efforts, and they absolutely are required and necessary, and they're Herculean. They need to turn into a detailed project schedule, some of the things that Graham mentioned. To me, we're all about project management and schedules. Schedules defining what you're going to do and then sticking with it. So it's the 2 expected outcomes. All that work up the top is wonderful and Herculean and critical and important to the extent it turns into a detailed schedule. So that's kind of the next step, and I'll get to that point in a minute. Again in a minute, but very positive progress. Sorry, I'll turn off my mic. 3 risk areas. These are all retrospective. These are based on the last project schedule, so we're not talking about what's being developed right now. But the 3 areas that the project has struggled with, that Maximus has made a high risk and which supports the project overall high risk, very quickly is testing. And that is the complexity of the requirements, the complexity of the environments, the complexity of bridging, all meant the project was taking a lot more time than they originally estimated or expected for testing. That's kind of the canary in the coal mine when it comes to functionality and quality, is when you get to testing, you actually start playing with stuff. That was something that the project struggled with. We expect this to be resolved or addressed in the next detailed schedule based on the time and resources that will now be available. The next one you've heard me probably every time we've met, project management. This one's probably been read the longest on our reports. A lot of progress has been made, but it still stays red. And this essentially is the schedule. It's the detailed development of the schedule. And I'll get to some of the things that we look at in a minute, but it includes some of the things that Graham mentioned and others. And the third and last high-risk area that Maximus is tracking is requirements. Validated by the fit gap, the detailed analysis, wonderful effort, but this also identified some of the areas that we're most concerned about. With the understanding these are all retrospective comments. So I added one last slide for going forward and how IVNV can help. First and foremost, as I mentioned, is the schedule. We did a in-depth analysis back in June, I believe, on the detailed project schedule. We developed a deliverable. We had high and medium, low risks identified, things that the project could actually go work on. Now with the project through the MOU and through the fit gap, we are anxiously awaiting the next detailed schedule, not the high-level one that we may have, or the project may have done now, but a much more detailed version of that. When that comes out, our suggestion is to do another detailed review. We're going to look at resources, we're going to look at time, we're going to look at dependencies, we're going to look at milestones. Oh, is my time up? No. And do a very thorough, detailed review of the project schedule, number one, and then its execution. It's how is that schedule going to be tracked and utilized? Yes, sir, Harry. Oh, sorry, Chair.
That's okay. Go ahead, Harry.
So John, as I think of schedules, maybe it's the train schedules from New York. I just looked up at the board and there's the schedule.
Yes.
Schedules are pretty easily created. I mean, it's a schedule. For me, how do we understand the execution of what's inside those schedules?
Right.
It's more for me, it's the execution of and how do we monitor the execution? A schedule, you can present it to us. This is the schedule. If it's on time.
More like a Swiss train.
Right.
Not the New York subway.
Yeah, I do.
Be careful, Jack. New York's a very fond place in my heart.
So don't set the bar too high, Jack. No, it's a very good comment. So honestly, I mean, part of our role.
But all kidding aside, how do we do, it's the schedule and then the execution. The execution is what's important.
Yeah, for me, like I mentioned, there's two steps, and the two things that you can follow up with me on next time is what's the schedule? And the schedule is obviously more than the train's schedule. It is a very detailed roadmap of what is going to be done by each team on the entire project for the duration of the project. I mean, it's all the work that needs to be completed to build the train, and that's really the schedule that I'm thinking of. It's not the train schedule as much as it's the design and implementation and the building of your house or of the train itself and the tracks and the zoning requirements and the.
Then my thinking would be, John, would it be appropriate then for us, the next time we see you, how are we doing with the schedule and how are we doing with the execution of that schedule?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Those are two good follow-up questions.
With you?
With me, yes, absolutely. And we'll go through a lot more of that. But as a normal course of our work, we would propose to do a very detailed analysis on the schedule as it starts. Yep. And then to me, as a practitioner, almost more importantly, is how is it being used, maintained, changed? Because at the end of the day, notwithstanding all the fit gaps and all the great people, there's going to be something that happens tomorrow that people didn't anticipate. How does the project react to that? How is the project deal with that? And then how is that manifested in the schedule? So for me, schedule is first and upfront for people making, okay. Other things just to throw out there that IVD can help with, there may be more detailed tracking that we can put in place or we can help put in place to watch progress. There may be assistance with the interim deliverables, the interim payment points, the demonstrations to help you, because obviously you've got a lot more time and you want to make sure that you've got a lot more granular tracking. So we can obviously participate in any of that to the extent you'd like us to. But those are two good follow-up questions, Harry. Thank you.
Lynn?
Thank you. And just to follow up on the schedule question that Harry was asking, I guess I'm just curious, how far in advance do you prepare your board agenda materials? Because I know that the project is moving along in real time and we're getting materials from Grant Thornton that was prepared a while ago. So what's the average lead time?
For us, it is a frustration, to be honest. So we put the paper packet together almost a month before the board meeting. So that's based on at least a month-old information, just because of the production or I guess the distribution of that. The slides are a little bit later. So we can be a little bit more timely on that. But the material that we put in the board packet for us is based on the most recently CalSTRS approved IVMV deliverable, which is at least a month and could be 6 weeks dated. So I'd be happy to work with you and staff to figure out a quicker way to do that or a better way to do that, because it is absolutely dated.
And for us, it's a little bit similar, but perhaps a little bit more recent, because we custom developed the board item based on what was in our last formal report, monthly report, but we'll make updates to it. So it's not necessarily reflective of exactly that. But then again, the PowerPoint is somewhat more recent, which is why the PowerPoint usually looks different to the written report, because we can reflect what's happened in the several weeks difference.
I wonder if that's something that we could talk about as a board, and just to see if there's any way to get even interim reports, especially since there are some parts of the calendar where we're not meeting for 2-3 months.
I think when we have the conversation about the calendar, I think that's probably a really good idea.
Okay.
All right.
We would obviously support that. I mean, that's a good idea.
Harry?
Lend my support to what Lynn's leading to. I would also, maybe we want to ask Amy McDuffie, our governance consultant,
think
to maybe
Amy's
give us
had
an
to-
opinion and view on that at the appropriate time.
Yeah, there you go.
Relative to oversight and how we want to close this gap that seems to be happening with the reporting and when we're seeing. So, yeah.
Jack's staff's on that, pretty much on that timeline too, aren't they? Our staff? Okay, thank you. All right, anything else for John or Graham? Gentlemen, thanks for hanging out
Thank you.
there
Yeah,
and
thanks.
taking the time. We still have quite a bit of stuff to do on our agenda.
I talked to her about it.
What I'd like to do is, so we're actually supposed to be in another committee already. We are going to do benefits and services tomorrow morning, 8:30. Sharon's made that decision, and she's talked with Andrew, and they're good to go.
Okay.
Audits was supposed to go at 10, correct?
Yeah, I'm sure you need an hour. So, Sharon.
We could do 9. What do you think, Andrew? Because we dropped the online.
Yeah.
So Andrew, do you think 50 minutes, so we have a little break between, do you think 50 minutes is doable? I just don't want to give you guys.
do less, an hour at the most.
All righty, so why don't we just go ahead and start at 9 then?
Let's do 9.
All righty. And you guys, and I apologize, but we've really lifted some pretty heavy weight today between our discussions in closed session and now, so it's, yeah, everything's kind of hit the